Hello everyone, I am the Raging Raven, and right now I'm gonna be a deck doctor. It literally says everything. I'm not gonna go into a complete tangent of what a deck doctor practically is. I'm just gonna jump right into the deep end and show you the deck that I'm gonna be looking at, how I can help this guy improve his deck, and so on and so forth. So with that being said, let's jump right into the deck. The deck we're looking at is gonna be from Sandwich Eat Fresh. Interesting name. And it is a zombie Shaddoll deck profile, and this comment says that it's basically get Construct out and Doom King out, then stall or something, I don't know. So you don't know the overall win condition of your deck? Well, that's what I'm going to be here for. I'm going to help you try and figure out a win condition for your deck. Anyways, let's have a good look at, it's a start, I guess. So here we have the deck in its entirety, and all I'm going to say right now at the moment is that even if I was a zombie Shaddoll player, this needs quite a fair amount of work, and I'm not saying that to be rude or anything, but I'm saying that as quite the know-about player, because this looks like it needs a whole lot more. Alright, so for the time being, I don't mind the effect veilers within the main deck, but in all honesty, in this format, effect veilers are actually pretty damn dismal, so we're going to swap those out for a hand trap that I think is better this format, being the Nibiru. The next option I want to bring up in mind is the Super Poly Sides, with the Super Poly target being in the side deck. All I'm going to say right now is this: never have it in the side deck. The thing is with Super Poly targets is that they always have to be in the main deck. Main extra deck, sorry. Regardless of if you are playing it in the first game or not. So, since we are going to be maining the Super Poly target, let's go ahead and actually add that in. So, we will add the Starving Venom for this one. Mainly because salads have been out of meta for far too long. There's practically no need to actually be worried about them for any amount of period of time, so there you go. So if we're going to be using this as a going first deck as well, the main strategy is not Construct and Balderach. Whilst Balderach is a going first option for zombies, our primary goal is to get Winder on board instead of Construct. So I think the ratios for Construct and Winder are actually fine. Apcolone is actually fine. I think you can get away with adding another one if you have Schism, but since you do not have Schism in here, I'm guessing that you don't have access to it, so I'm going to say one Apcolone is fine for the time being, which means we can say goodbye to the second one. Speaking of ratios, there's a lot of odd choices in here, like Shakanaga makes perfect sense because of the Zukis right here, but Greister, this is one I don't get, and I think you added this in mainly because of Solitaire, but if you're asking me, even if this is supposed to be a Super Poly target, like I said, salads are no longer in the game right now, so even if this is a fusion target, it may be best to just simply get rid of it. Another Super Poly target that I might want to consider to anyone is Mud Dragon. If I can spell this guy, there we go. So Mud Dragon, pretty much another simple to get one now. It just requires two monsters with the same attribute but different types. But with a lot of fields controlling multiple calamities, this format, Starving Venom is of course a superior option. There's a lot of Super Poly targets out there, actually. You can easily look up a Wikipedia article on which ones are the best Super Poly targets and just simply go off of those. But for an extra deck option, I would say for the time being would be a good one to have in here in general would be a Nightmare. So we're going to have a Nightmare in the extra deck, and we're going to have it in the form of Phoenix. But at the same time, these two Synchros, what? We're gonna add a unicorn. So these guys just got released in rares as of recently, so they're now ridiculously as cheap as chips. You can easily just pick your hands up on one of these guys and roll off of it. Gravity Controller is completely fine, however, since we don't have Schism in the deck at all, I'm gonna have to say that we're gonna have to say farewell to him. He's just not viable in the deck in my mind. But speaking of which, as I stated earlier, this is supposed to be a Super Poly based deck, right? So let's actually have the Super Polymerizations in the main deck, along with a Draco Necro. So the Neversoul Dragon pretty much requires two zombie monsters, and with Super Poly and Zombie World, it's actually pretty easy to force this guy onto the field. And as I stated earlier, this is cheap as chips, you can easily pick it up without any form of hassle whatsoever. So, speaking of going first turn plays, why the heck is Lost Wind in here? I can understand the fact of having Winder on board is everything, but there are going to be boards where you're never going to have Winder or Balderoch on the board at the same time. You can have one or the other, but in all honesty, I just think Lost Wind is at best side deckable. You don't know what your opponent is going to be playing, especially in a format that we're in right now. You don't know what's going to hit you in the face until it is too late. So, Super Polys, I say, are a main deck option. Pot of Avarice is just not needed. I'm just going to be brutally honest right now. Avarice is practically not needed, mainly because zombies spend a lot of time banishing. I can understand sending the Shaddolls back, but honestly, as soon as the zombies are in the graveyard, there's very little use for them anymore. So you might want to keep Pot of Avarice out of the deck. Dark Ruler No More is a single. It's useless for this format. Dark Ruler No More is pretty much, without a shadow of a doubt, one of the worst hand traps this format. Well, not hand traps, but board killers this format. Everything is already passive on board. There's a lot of trap-based decks in the meta, which Dark Ruler can't touch. So, it's pretty much easy to just leave it as that. El Shaddoll Fusion at 1. I can see the thought process behind this, but when we're using just primarily Shaddoll Fusion as a whole, I don't necessarily see the point of this. But for the time being, I'll pop it into side deck as a maybe option. Whilst I'm going on with the dilemmas at the moment, we have a Foolish Burial in here, which is good, and the targets being, of course, Necro Banshee and Glow Up Bloom, which, I'm not gonna lie, are fantastic options. Alright then, so, continuing along, Dragon. I would say it would be a good card this format, but I think it's side-worthy, in all honesty. That at best, or at worst, whatever. But, speaking of which, we do have, like I said, the Glow Up Bloom in here, so in order to get him on the field and stuff in the grave, why not run 1 for 1? It's like a very easy to get common as of right now at the moment, if I recall correctly. There's like tons of these guys out here, so you can activate this, ditch any one of your zombies, and get Glow Up Bloom on the field. It's actually kind of simple and easy to use to get him out. I really don't think you should run dangers in a Shaddoll and Zombie Central strategy. If you want to run dangers in a Zombie Central deck, good on ya! But I'd rather prefer it if it was like a purely zombie strategy or a purely Shaddoll strategy rather than the other. So we're just going to leave it at that. The ratios with Mizuki and Gozuki are a little odd. Usually, a lot of decks I've seen with these guys usually run 2 of one and 3 of the other, so we're just going to go with that real quickly. There we are. Now, believe it or not, there's actually one card in this format that actually destroys a lot of boards, which not a lot of people see coming. And that is Raigeki. It turns Zeus into nothing more but paper. It completely obliviates the Calamities boards. Pretty much a lot of boards you can see in the meta as of right now have practically 0 protection. They're all interruption, no protection, and Raigeki just practically laughs at them. So you can use this, but if this deck is supposedly for going first, like what we're doing with it right now, side. Alright, so let's have a look at this right now real quickly as well. We're running Twin Twisters in the side deck, which is good. You want to have these cards in the side deck. I'm pretty sure in both the Shaddoll and the Zombie structure decks, you'd get a playset of these things if you buy 3 of them. So, with that being said, let's actually max out the Twin Twisters. So far, everything is looking like it's getting along fairly well, but there's actually one card that can actually help out the main deck by a landslide. And that's a choice between one of these 2 cards. So, for going first purposes with the Winder and, of course, Balderoch, it's obviously best to make sure there's some form of protection to keep them on board. Now, the Mirror Forces I can easily understand, but there's nothing stopping your opponent from repeating the same play again. You want to make sure that those plays are off the board as soon as possible. So, what do I recommend? Easy. I recommend one of these cards. It's either Torrential Tribute or Needle Sealing. So these cards' functionality do the exact same thing, but what's different about each one is that Needle Sealing only targets face-up monsters when there are 4 or more monsters on the field, whilst Torrential Tribute pretty much eviscerates anything on the field as long as something is summoned. For this deck, I think it's best to have like a Torrential Tribute setup rather than a Needle Sealing setup. Of course, it's going to completely bypass the protection that window will have, but it will at least give you some form of protection. So I say main deck one of these, and for the purposes of what we're going to be doing, I think it may be best to have a torrential tribute on board rather than anything else. So we're going to keep the tributes. So we have our Wendy, we have our Ariel, and we have our Beast and Squamata, but honestly, I think it may be best if we just get rid of a Hedgehog, the Squamata, and yeah, I think that should pretty much be it. Mainly because at this point we have practically a decent setup, but not a setup nonetheless that we want to keep going. An extra deck monster that we want to make sure that we have if we're going to be doing the Incarnation loop is, of course, Cross Sheep. Without this card, the whole loop between Ariel, the Incarnation, Construct, and whatever cannot be resolved, but at the same time, it's not necessarily needed, so take this as an option rather than a recommendation for the deck. Alright then, so one thing that I recognized in the deck that we actually might want to consider, since we are going to be using this Shaddoll Incarnation along with everything else, I don't really think it's best for us to continue with the loop. So we're going to take that out, and we're actually going to add some Synchro Monsters into our extra deck. And with that, we are, of course, going to add Psyframe Lord Omega. Every zombie deck should have this guy in. He is just ridiculous. The fact that he can return stuff from your banished zone to the graveyard is already amazing, so that you could use him once more. But what makes him even more better in those regards is the fact that he can actually disrupt your opponent's hand until your next turn. So you can actually make your opponent lose one card in their hand when their turn officially begins, so they're going to have one card less, which will make things absurd. If I'm roaming along in the stretch right now, I'm going to be completely honest, I don't think there's going to be much need for Trick Clowns, so instead we're going to try and add something that will help benefit the deck in the long term. Now, Relinquish Anima, I can easily see using that as a Link 1 option, especially with conjunction of Glow Up Bloom, but we want a turn 1 option as well. So, looking at all the entire of the extra deck, we're going to have to get rid of at least one of these guys, and I think the best one to get rid of is, without a shadow of a doubt, going to have to be Avendred Savior. If we're going to be going first, Vampire Sucker is the best scenario. Going second builds require the Avendred Savior, so we're going to get rid of him and keep her instead. Mainly because we're going to add in Linkuriboh. Going first, Linkuriboh is obviously a much better option, and it actually sets up the board a whole lot more better. There's always another. You can't go wrong with having multiple of the field spells active at once. As I said, Effect Veiler is a going second card and good for the meta. Actually, now that I think about it, since we're going first, let's have Nibiru's in the side deck. And let's get rid of the Shaddoll Dragon and the El Shaddoll View. Now, we could put the Needle Ceiling in the side deck, but honestly, since we have room in the main deck right now, we could put the Needle Ceilings there. There are other options as well to help us mitigate going first, like Bottomless Trap Hole. But I think there's a much better trap hole out there, so let's just have a look at our hole options and see what we have. So of course we're not going to be running Standard Trap Hole or DD Trap Hole. Bottomless Trap Hole is of course one of the better ones. There's Gravedigger's Trap Hole, but that one's like £20 per pop, which is ridiculous. Floodgate Trap Hole. This is one that actually, I think it came in a common recently, and it's actually a pretty damn formidable one. It actually wastes an opponent's summon as well if you actually time it correctly with Winder. So you know what, let's actually use a Floodgate Trap Hole. Plus at the same time it makes anything that your opponent has set a sitting duck with Balderach if they decide to use a zombie effect whilst he's on the board, or if you have a Winder on board and Balderach on board and you decide to activate one of your zombie players and just chain Balderach in response. So let's see what our first turn hand would look like. This is a somewhat okay first hand. That's a better first turn hand actually, I'm not gonna lie. Alright then, so I'd say as of right now the deck is better as what it is. There are Solemn Strikes which were available in Dual Devastator, which you can use over Floodgate Trap Hole. It's completely up to you, but I'm just using Floodgate Trap Hole mainly because it just completely bypasses a lot of the restrictions that the opponent may have. Plus, it can completely end their turns on the spot if you time it correctly, which is amazing. So, depending on what you have, if you had a Floodgate Trap Holes, go over Floodgate Trap Holes. If you have a Solemn Strikes, go over Solemn Strikes. Pick your poison, basically, is what I'm saying. So, finally, for side deck. There's one card that I'm wondering why it is not in here. It came with a zombie structure deck, and it just is a fantastic side deck card. I'm not going to lie. That being Anti-Spell. Now, as of right now, I think Anti-Spell is a horrendous Floodgate, but depending on the competition, it can actually be a devastating Floodgate. There is Drytron roaming around the place, and there are cards like Zodiac Eldritch that are roaming around the place, but one of the main priorities at the moment is Virtual World that you need to keep your eye on. So this card, at the moment, horrendous against Virtual World, fantastic against anything else. So we're going to have it as a side deck option mainly because we don't know what we're going up against, whereas these cards are fantastic against all of them. So, that is what I would change with this deck. I hope you guys have enjoyed this little episode of Deck Doctor, guys, because in all honesty, it was actually a lot of fun just having a look at this deck, rearranging it, and seeing what would work and what wouldn't work. And in all honesty, I actually had a lot of fun. So if you actually want to have a part with all of this Deck Doctor series, then here's what you have to do in order to be a part of it. You have to be a part of one of 3 Discord servers, my own, Artist with a Rose, or Raining Card Games. Just add me on any single one of those, and you'll be good to go. Then present your deck in all its formality, so main, extra. If you do not have a side for it, don't worry about it, but just clarify that you want to focus on the main and extra rather than the side. I can easily do that. Put in what the deck's overall playstyle is, what its win condition is supposed to be, and what your expectations of a deck is, as well as the name of a deck as well. Please keep this in mind. If you are going to throw in a meme deck, make sure that you explain what the deck is supposed to do. Otherwise, I'm just going to damn right ignore it. Not saying that I'm not going to do any meme decks, because in all honesty, I've seen somebody present a Berserk Dragon deck in front of me at one point. I was literally baffled of seeing somebody actually trying to make Berserk Dragon of all things work. And if you don't know what Berserk Dragon is, there you go. And I'll see what I can do in order to help make it better. But until next time, guys, I've been Raging Raven, and if you have enjoyed this video, leave it a like, subscribe, yada yada yada, all that bland blabbity blah 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 stuff. But until next time, guys, I bid you all adieu.